Hey everyone, this is Chris. Welcome back to the channel, and this is your daily uncut news. So I want to start with this because I think it's important. Is what the heck is going on with Samsung? We don't talk about a lot in this channel, although we're in Korea here, so obviously Samsung is important to Koreans. But in fact, it is representative of sort of what's going on in the overall markets and what's going on around the world. They're a consumer brand, essentially. They sell phones, but they also make chips for a ton of products. And you guys probably know this. Their TVs are really good. I don't work for Samsung. I'm just telling you, their TVs are really good. And the thing is like if we were all buying TVs, say at Best Buy, during the pandemic, how many more TVs do you need the next couple of years, next 5 years, whatever, right? And those kind of things are cyclical in nature, and so Samsung is just a representative of this sort of thing. And the other thing as well is the same with something like a phone, right? How often do you need to upgrade your phone, especially going into recession? Are we all going to be buying $1,000 phones? And I'm going to say probably not. In fact, Samsung's saying, our profits are going to be down 32%, which is a big difference. Now, they're still going to make money. It's not like this is an unprofitable company like that. But I think this is a larger sort of view of thinking about how does Samsung fit into everything. Is like if Samsung's going to be sinking in profit, what do you think is going to be happening with Apple? What do you think is going to be happening with, say, LG? What about Google? These kind of companies, right? I think it all matters. And in fact, if you take a look at this is from a essentially a analyst in Seoul. And this is what they say. They say this down cycle is not merely driven by typical supply and demand dynamics. It is different from the past cycles due to geopolitical risks. So we're talking about Russia, Ukraine, talking about China as well. You can see here the U.S. government's exports controls would further limit IT companies' sales in China, and a large chunk of demand for chips will be weakened. If AMD, NVIDIA can't sell their chips in China, memory makers' earnings will deteriorate further. So they kind of all trade together. It's just how it is. The AMD or NVIDIA is not making money. Samsung's not making money. This is sort of something that I want you to understand that we're all connected. And in fact, AMD came out and said, "Wow, we're not doing so great either. PC sales are down, right?" So Samsung's like, "Yo, TV sales are down," and AMD's like, "Yo." PC sales are down. In fact, here's a quote from him, or them, I should say. And in fact, this is Lisa Su, and they're saying here that sales in the third quarter are going to be down 15%. But however, was this last quarter? No, a year ago, they were up 29%. So, their trajectory is still in the upward direction, but it's kind of like, spike 29, come back down 15 kind of thing. And basically, this is what they're saying over there at AMD. The PC market weakened significantly in the quarter, while our product portfolio remains very strong. Macroeconomic conditions drove lower than expected PC demand and a significant inventory correction across the PC supply chain. So, this is sort of like how you understand the markets is when multiple companies are reporting kind of what they're expecting. And this is sort of, why things go down. Remember, one of the things I always want you to think about is, the price of stocks is essentially based on, right, if we do trade in fundamentals, which I think we're getting back to, how much companies earn. And I say if we're getting back to, because there was a while there was a big disconnect. And it was kind of interesting in terms of like stock price and how much companies are earned. And it was so funny. I was actually looking this up. This was on October 28th back in 2021. And I remember this. You guys probably remember this too, where Zuckerberg and the team said, "Hey, everyone, we're going to rename Facebook to Meta because like the metaverse is the future. We're all going to be cool and everything." And I remember like they were really pushing that on many media. There was all the talk on CNBC. They even had like these avatars. They were just like really pushing it. And I feel like, and I've mentioned to you guys before, I feel like sometimes you got to be careful because it seems like oftentimes Wall Street's like a big scam. Like they're all trying to push this stuff that's like just not going to happen, right? And it was shortly thereafter when it was Rivian reached its peak, and I remember telling everyone like, "Yo, I think we're at the top," because like Rivian was like the second most valuable car company in the world that had never made a car. It was obviously ridiculous, and it's funny because I don't know if we're going to look back in history and say, when Facebook said they're going to change their name and they're going to invest a whole bunch of money in this metaverse thing, I don't know if we're going to look back, say 10 years from now, and say, "Wow, that was obviously ridiculous," or are we going to look back and say, "Wow, that was obviously genius"? And I think that'll be interesting. But the reason why I mentioned that is because that whole metaverse craze for that brief moment was pushing up, a lot of your chip makers, pushing up like your Roblox kind of stuff. And even Samsung would be benefiting from that kind of thing because that was just the talk of everywhere. And, we've kind of really changed. God, that was a year ago already, basically. But just really changed our thinking on this kind of stuff. As you can see, that even Samsung is reporting that they may not be making as much money going into the future. One of the things that you're going to be hearing about a lot, which is really quite interesting, is OPEC did a sort of a different game plan than what Biden and the White House had thought. Because the early reporting is that there's something like, OPEC's going to cut production, but maybe a million barrels. And then they come out and say, hey, everyone, we might going to be doing 2 billion barrels. And essentially what's going on is, and this is really quite interesting, and it's sort of why I do this, guys, with you, is sort of understand how the world works. It appears that there were definitely negotiations between the White House and Saudi Arabia to try to get oil flowing so that he could win the election, essentially, or win the midterms, I should say. Because basically, if gas prices are high, it doesn't matter which party is in power. It's really hard to win because people look at their wallets and are like, oh my God, I hate it that this person's in office. I want my gas prices to be lower. And this is something I've complained. You guys know I harp on this over and over again. I don't want any American president, Democrat or Republican, having to take these meetings with Saudi Arabia and have to like worry about what they think. And this is both parties. It's a real problem. It's not like suddenly Biden came into power and we're talking to Saudi Arabia. We've been doing this stuff for years. And it's quite interesting when you read the details of this. And I'll read this with you guys. I think you'll find it really interesting as well. So here we go. Basically, Democrats are irritated about what Saudi Arabia did in terms of cutting production, right? Because it's going to hurt their election chances because gas prices are going to go up. And it's saying right here, 3 Democratic members of Congress said on Wednesday that they would introduce legislation that would mandate the removal of U.S. troops and missile defense systems from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, right? So this is about weapons here. And something I've told you guys about for a long time is that Saudis give a lot of money to weapons manufacturers, American ones. And that's why I've always said, and this is just reality, defense contractors do really, really well. It doesn't matter recession or not, they're going to make money. The government is going to give, it's just how it is. They're going to give them contracts. They're going to spend money. They don't really cut that. And the joke always is Republicans, spend money on the military to look strong, and Democrats spend money on the military to not look weak. It's a joke. But basically, nothing changes is the whole point. And then this is more of it. We see no reason why American troops and contractors should be continue to provide this service to countries that are actively working against us, meaning like, hey, Saudis, help us out with the election here, get gas prices down, right? And we'll keep our troops there. I think understand how corrupt our whole system is. I'm just really, really honest here. If Saudi Arabia and UAE want to help Putin, they should look to him for their defense. And that's from House Democrats Tom Alinsky, Sean Casten, and Susan Wild. But like I said, don't think that this is a single party thing. This is a dual party thing. And I promise you, you'll look throughout the years, you'll see it. You'll see Bush was hanging out with the Saudis and Trump and Obama, everyone. It's just part of our politics, and we gotta get away from these guys. I'm telling you, I say it so much. Also, too, which is really quite interesting, is Biden keeps talking about that they're taking the Putin and the Armageddon threat, essentially nuclear weapon threat, seriously. I'm not sure what to make of that myself. I always ask you guys in the community what you think. I mean, I think we all know the reality is if Putin didn't have any nuclear weapons, we'd just go and push him out of Ukraine and this would be over, but he does. And they do take this stuff seriously. I mean, this is a quote from Biden. And so the reason why I mention this is because essentially what's going on is if oil prices stay high, it benefits Russia essentially. So, who knows, maybe Russia gave the Saudis a better deal than the Americans, and this could be how the world works, unfortunately. Who knows? And I'd love to hear you guys' opinion on this, but this stuff is really frustrating to, hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying, to us regular people when we have to essentially see where our tax dollars go and see people's lives are at stake, this kind of stuff. But this is something that I think is an interesting premise that Biden is talking about here is, where does Putin stop? And this is sort of, he's talking about Putin here. We're trying to figure out what is Putin's off ramp, right? So, how does Putin get out of the situation? Where does he get off? Where does he find a way out? And where does he find himself in a position that he does not only lose face, but lose significant power in Russia? So the idea is that from Putin's point of view is what Biden's talking about here. And I'm saying you guys can understand this. You start a war, you told all your people we're going to try to win this war, and then like sort of maintain power, save face. How do you get out of it if you can't win, right? And it's a horrible situation all around, right? And so you have to think about from Putin's mindset. He's I guess going to fight to the bitter end, but what does that mean, right? And so this is more Biden continuing. He is not joking when he talks about potential use of tactical nuclear weapons or biological and chemical weapons, because his military is, you might say, significantly underperforming. I don't think there's any such thing as the ability to easily use tactical nuclear weapons and not end up with Armageddon. So we'll see. Biden mentioned this before Putin's speech, so I think our intel must be telling him something. And I've mentioned that along. I think our intel's been pretty good regarding Russia. And also too with Russia, it's kind of interesting. This is the first report that I've seen something like this, to where I know that people were leaving the country. Basically, they don't want to fight Putin's war. And this is interesting, where I guess a couple guys ran to Alaska because it's not that far. I mean, you guys know, if you look at the map, that like it's like the northern eastern part of Russia and like the northern western part of Alaska. They're right there. And I guess evidently you can actually defect to Alaska. It's really quite interesting. Moving on to other news, Elon Musk and this is related actually. I mean, as I mentioned before, I want to get off of oil. Hopefully, Elon Musk and other companies can help us do that by going electric. Evidently, though, they're going to be actually producing these semi trucks. So they were announced in like 2017, and we were saying like whether or not these are vaporware, but we're in 2022, and maybe they're actually going to start doing these. Saying started production in December 1st, and they're going to do it for Pepsi here. Pepsi and there's a couple other companies that were also ordered these things. I think Walmart was another one. We'll read this together. I think it was Walmart and Pepsi. So Pepsi has said it expects to deploy the first 15 Tesla semi-truck tractors by the end of the year. I'm not sure if that's going to be a thing, but we'll see. Part of an order for 100 all-electric Class 8 tractors from Austin, right? So there's an order for 100. They're going to start making these things. The thing though, which I understand, you can see there's a Walmart is in this mentioned in this as well. But the thing which I think is really important to understand is there is a federal tax credit. I can see right here, $40,000 per heavy duty truck purchase under recently passed legislation. So these things are subsidized, and when the subsidization goes away, meaning our tax dollars are helping to pay for these things essentially. When those things go away, I'll be curious if companies are still all on board on getting electric semis. I don't know. So do be aware that there certainly is opportunity for Tesla to make money with these things, but like I said, there is a subsidization in there, so that certainly matters, I think, and especially where companies are trying to manage their bottom line. Also, too, we're going to be seeing on Friday there'll be a jobs report. It's important, but we're in a weird world where good news is bad news and bad news is good news, or is good news good news. So, meaning that if it turns out maybe jobs are really good, right? And people aren't filing for unemployment, and there's jobs everywhere, and people are still hiring, etc. But then the Fed's like, whoa, we need low unemployment hires, so we're going to be more aggressive, right? And then the reverse would be, let's find out that companies are firing everybody and everything looks really grim, and then that means the economy's not looking so good. But it's kind of a weird situation. So we'll see what they report on Friday and how the market reacts. But I'm kind of more focused. I'm not saying jobs are not important. They are, because I track unemployment. As you said, we're at 3.7 now. It'll probably be like 4.5 next year, and I've been saying maybe 5%. Keep an eye on that because Fed watches that as well. But this thing, who knows? I mean, the market is so finicky. I think, in my opinion, the larger sort of thing to track, and that's why I started with it, was the Samsung and the AMD reports, essentially, that the tech sales, which also represent consumer sales and chips and stuff like that, that they're going to be down, right? You take a look at something like this. I can see the 2-year Treasury, 4.23, so it's actually still quite high. As long as it's above 4, it's hard to be bullish on the stocks. You take a look at this as well. This is the S&P 500 P ratio, right? So this is the look at the 500 greatest companies in the USA essentially, and what's their price in relationship to their earnings, and we're at 18.92, and the mean right over history has been about 16 or in that range. So we're still trading a little bit high, and we're going to recession, and for the P to come down, either companies need to make more money, which I just don't see any companies reporting that. Or the price of stocks need to come down. So you still might be able to get stocks a little bit cheaper. And if you are interested in stocks and stuff, at least you're not buying at the top. So that's the good news, right? But certainly seems to be weaknesses that we keep seeing in the news, and projections seem to be weak in economies all around the world. You take a look at this. The dollar is still strong to the pound. And I was looking at this, this is the dollar to the pound in the past year. You're looking at 22%. What's going on with the Credit Suisse thing. I keep reading different rumors and stuff. So, your guys' guess is as good as mine. The whole thing over the weekend when they were calling people saying, hey, we're okay. I felt like it meant that they're not okay. But they're trying to say that everything's good and they're buying back debt, $3 billion worth. So we'll see if they can pull it out. But I think the real date to keep an eye on is October 27th, I believe is what it is when they're going to announce their plan to restructure. And we'll see. I've heard different reports that they need like 4 to 6 billion. I've heard other reports that like they're looking to sell off some assets or bring in like a buyout kind of possibility. But who knows? We'll find out October 27th, and we may or may get some leaks before then. The other thing too, which I think is interesting, is Asia's sort of slowing down as well. So you see slowdowns in Europe, slowdown in Asia. We've already seen that Chinese GDP is not growing anywhere what it used to. Right, it used to be like double digit, but that was like 10 years ago already. And you take a look at this, and this is Japan. Like look at the dollar to the yen. It's like 30%, upswing on the dollar. It's crazy. And it's funny. There was this thing article about Japan to where people in Japan don't really trust the markets. In fact, this is Nomura, so it's basically like a Goldman Sachs kind of thing. They can't go into high schools and they try to teach kids about investing because essentially they want future customers, of course, right? But when you read this description, it's really quite interesting. It's very different than USA. I'll read it to you for you guys here. About 8 in 10 Japanese have never invested in securities. And you can see here, security investments account for only 16% of the 2 quadrillion yen in household financial assets, and that's compared to 56% in the USA. So Japanese just aren't into like stocks and securities. It's not their thing. And when you read this, you can see why. An asset price bubble erased trillions of dollars in wealth in Japan when it burst. Right, this is the big bubble of Japan when it burst in the early 90s, creating a generation of people who believe stocks will only go down. It's really funny because we have a generation here in America of like people who got in the market, say right at the stimulus checks and the pandemic, that believe that only stocks go up. So it's very interesting, the cultural difference. Instead, for decades, most have held the majority of the wealth in cash. Right, Japanese mostly just have cash, and that's left many missing out on the bottom of Goldman Sachs. So what they're saying is, if you would have bought the bottom in 2008, even in Japan, you would have been doing okay, and that's for a lot of things. So it is certainly some truth to that. But where is the bottom? That's why I show you guys these kind of charts. I feel like there could be still more pain in the head. Can I predict the future 100%? Not at all. But I can show you guys and sort of show how I read the market and what I'm looking at indicator wise. Kind of know, are we expensive? Are we cheap? And also see what companies say. So that's why we track all of these things together, and hope it's interesting for you guys. Also too, you'll see these kind of things. I noticed that like, NEO stock, it was really taking a dive. I mean, we see Tesla stock going down, but many of the Chinese EV makers were going down because essentially there's just fear that people in China aren't going to be spending money on these things, right? This sort of stuff, and it is certainly true you want to be buying when it's max fear, but are we there yet? It's anyone's guess. I mean, I personally think there's some more downside, but I don't know for sure. So, the best advice in all these situations is, stay diversified. If you're interested, just understand sort of like what you're getting yourself into. I myself would stick with profitable companies. That's just me. And stick with PE ratios that make sense, because I think going forward, the growth, the world growth will be slowed. This is all the projections are saying that. This is what it looks like. So, we'll see. I read this kind of news as well. I never know what to take this one seriously or not. So I'm in Korea. You guys know that. But the North Koreans have been a little bit more aggressive lately in terms of military. So I guess the USA and the Koreans are now, doing joint operations to show a show of force. So we'll see. Hopefully right now it's just a bunch of saber rattling and nothing to be too worried about. But we'll see what happens with that. Also too, which is really quite interesting, Binance got hacked, and I guess it's like $100 million that someone stole or something like that. It's like, what? I just don't trust these crypto exchanges. I've told you guys that before. I'm curious what people's thoughts on these things, and you guys know that there's a bunch of other YouTubes out there that either pump up Binance or they're pumping you FTX and stuff like that. I just don't trust it. For me, like I'm kind of more Japanese in that way. We're like, you know what? I'm all about cash. Stocks only go down, and crypto only gets stolen. So that's sort of my perspective on these things. And you read this here. It says, this is Binance. A spokesman for Binance backed blockchain BNB chain estimated the incident involving 100 million to 110 million of digital tokens. At least 7 million of the stolen funds has already been frozen, so they can freeze these things even though they've been stolen. But this part was kind of crazy here, though. About 2 billion has been lost in crypto hacks this year, many perpetrated by North Korea linked groups. Like, what the heck? So that is a real thing. I government-sponsored stealing of crypto. I wouldn't put it past the North Koreans. You never know what they're doing over there. And I guess, like I said, I don't trust it. But I would love you guys to hear your thoughts on that. If you think anything is safe in the crypto space these days, and I'm sure there are people out there who have opinions on that. One thing though is funny is the Japanese hold cash. I'm all about King Dollar as well. However, this is really interesting in Pakistan because their currency has been crashing, and we talked about this before a couple of days ago, to where it was something like there's projections that they have a 50% a 50% chance, like 50-50, that their currency will completely devalue. And as it turns out, if you buy a car in Pakistan, and even if you drive it around, your car will be worth more than what you bought it for. So it's like buying a car is like buying a house where it appreciates. I was like, what the heck? It's such a crazy thing. So that was a really interesting story. And then the last one, which is always kind of fun, wanted to give you guys a little chuckle. So there was a dude, his name is Calvin Bautista, and he was smuggling snakes in his pants. It's a real thing. Pythons in his pants. There was 3 of them. And for whatever reason, he's being charged now. This was a crime back in 2018. You can see here. He's accused of bringing hidden snakes on a bus that crossed into the northern New York on July 15th, 2018. They're Burmese pythons, and I guess that they're regulated, right, because they're not supposed to bring animals across the border, that are injurious to human beings. So this was coming in from Canada that this person was doing this. So if you're Canadian and you're putting snakes in your pants coming to USA, please just cut it out. keep your snake in your pants, or keep your snakes where they belong, not in your pants. So anyway, it's just kind of a funny story. I was like, what the heck are people doing these days? And I didn't know this was a thing. I did not know snake smuggling was a thing. So if you know about this, let me know. It could be that these things are worth a lot of money, and you sell them in pet stores or something like that. I have no idea, but evidently that's the thing. So that's your story for the day. And if you forget everything I said, just remember, people do smuggle snakes in their pants. But anyway, I do appreciate everyone joining us for today, and this has been your daily Uncut News.